So, Roddy, before I ask you about the draft, right? Because that's what we're trying to do. There's actual sports that are happening next week, and you know it's worth discussing. But I would be remiss to not ask you how you're holding up with two girls under the ages of
Yeah.
3, right? Like your oldest
They
is
are,
2, 2.5.
yeah,
So
two girls
Wow.
under the age of 3.
how are we holding
They
up
are
at the Jones household
they're
in
2.5
quarantine?
and 1.5.
Yeah.
Look, man, I mean, it's a daily thing. They are great, but they're toddlers. So, it's frustrating at times, but it's been, I would say, all in all, it's been fun. But I mean, how it is. Like today was one of those days where half the day I couldn't get enough of them, and half the day I wanted them to go to sleep. Like, just it's time for you to go to bed. It's time for you to go to bed.
Yeah, it's a
But yeah,
challenge. It's tough. It's tough. And for those that have to work at home, it's like having 2 jobs and you multiply that by the number of kids. So, yeah, it's a grind. But hey, we've got sports coming up next week. The NFL draft are rolling around and let's talk about it, right? Cuz Wayne and I tried to talk about it on our first show back. We got sidetracked, which normally happens when Wayne's on the program. That's fine. I mean, we rally, we overcome. But you played tailback at the Institute, right? And this is a running back crop that is it's interesting because there's talent on the board, Roddy, but the running back position has changed over the last decade. I feel like these guys are undervalued more so than they were probably 10 years ago coming out of college.
yeah, I will agree with you on the undervalued part. I think it's just the way that the position has gone. If you look at the position at the NFL level, how many of these guys that pop up and are great are undrafted free agents or lower round picks? And then when the analytics guys get involved, the guys that you love, Steven, the analytics guys,
Yeah, love
they'll
those
tell
guys.
you that the correlation of yards per carry and the difference between the best and the worst, there's a stronger correlation with changes on the offensive line, how good your passing game is, how good your play action game is. Those are the kind of things that people, when they really dig into it, it doesn't really matter who you have back there if you have all those other pieces. Now, you know me, I'm still a running back purist. I think those guys matter. And with the way the position is going, look at the money that Christian McCaffrey just got. With the way that the position is going, guys that can do both, that can affect the pass game and the run game, are still really valuable. So I think there's some real gems in this draft. I really do.
Roddy, that's awesome that you brought up McCaffrey because um, the game is changing. It's changed for quarterbacks. It used to be, the big, tall guy that could move around in the pocket and throw the ball is great, but now we're looking for guys that have mobility and can move around. And can, Justin Herbert's tall, but he's not a typical tall statue. He can run, so that makes him more valuable. What McCaffrey does is amazing, and he's done it for a long time, but he's got the Marshall Faulk type
Yeah,
complete
yeah.
package. Marshall
I
Faulk
love
was kind of
Marshall
like
Faulk, man.
right. Well, he was a running back before his time.
Yeah.
He probably fit into today's game, maybe even more, and he was great back then. I'm just curious what you think about that evolution and what even maybe running backs should be focused on as they're coming up, even as young as high school.
I think you have to be able to be balanced. I think there's so much of the pro game that has to do with being able to affect the pass game. And I'm about catching the ball. Obviously, catching the ball
Yeah.
is important, but being able to pass block, being able to split out, being able to run routes out of the slot. I think all of those things are really important. So if I'm a young running back, I'd be asking to go out to slot receiver and get some reps. I'd be asking my high school coach to
Yeah.
put me in protection sometimes. Let me scan, let me read, let me at least get the feel of what that looks like. Because then when you get to the next level in college, you can be that third down guy if you have a more experience. If you have more experience back in front of you and see your role kind of evolve. DeAndre Swift's a great example of that.
Yep.
His freshman year, when you had Nick Chubb and Sony Michel, he was a third down back. He was a guy that could affect the game on third downs because they trusted him in the pass game. And then as he evolved and became the bell cow, he ended up being the guy, and he had other guys take over as a third down back. So I think that's kind of what I would do if I were a young running back.
Is Swift the best tailback in the draft? I mean, it's a loaded question, Roddy, but based on what you've seen, I mean, is he the class of this crop?
Look, I think you could really flip a coin between he and J.K. Dobbins, depending on what you want. Andre Swift for a couple of reasons. One, I think his home run ability is incredible. I think he can hit a home run from anywhere on the field. The speed, the power, his ability to make people miss in the open field is fantastic. I think he's a little bit better receiver than Jake as well. I mean, the last taste in my mouth for J.K. Dobbins, unfortunately, is the college football playoff. And in that, he dropped passes basically on one drive down inside the 10, dropped 2 passes that would have been touchdowns. One, that little flare in the corner of the end zone, and the other one, that screen pass. So as a receiver, I trust DeAndre Swift a little bit more, although I think J.K. Dobbins is a fantastic back who's going to continue to develop in terms of catching the football.
All right, this is a little bit of a loaded question because I think it's challenging, and I think about this with quarterbacks too. When you play at – nice background. We see that. When you play at like you just mentioned Dobbins, when you play at Ohio State, you're surrounded by the best athletes in your conference and some of the best athletes in the country. When you play at Alabama, when you play at – we've watched, for example, an Alabama running back that's been great. I mean, shoot, you just have to go to last year's playoffs, right, with Henry and how good he was. But when you're surrounded by so much talent, is it hard to evaluate those players? Like, I truly think J.K. Dobbins, when he got hurt, cost Ohio State big time in that game when he tweaked his ankle. I truly believe that they had a chance to win that game if he stays healthy. But that being said, is it hard to evaluate talent when they come from such elite programs and they're surrounded by such great players at every single position? Does it always translate? I know running back's different than quarterback. Might be a different answer there. I'm just curious what you think about that.
I do think you have to normalize things. I think Tua Tagovailoa is a great example, and his receivers. I mean, Tua may not play with an NFL receiver that's as good as the receivers that he had in college. Right. Those guys at Alabama probably won't play with a pro quarterback that's as good as Tua. Yeah. So how do you evaluate that? In the case of J.K. Dobbins and running backs in general, running back is such an athletic position. It's such a sort of instinctive position. You need certain things. Obviously, vision helps, but if a guy's running through wide open holes and can't make anybody miss in the open field, like, that's on you. So from that perspective, I think running back actually may be one of the easier ones to evaluate. Now, look, I look at a guy, I think the guy that's harder to evaluate, to be quite honest, is Jonathan Taylor, Wisconsin, because he had one of the best O-lines in the country all 3 years. And yes, he's a bigger back, has some wiggle in the open field, has great speed. I think he ran a sub 4.4. But when you're talking about a guy that puts the ball on the ground that much, that's running behind the best offensive line in college football or out, how much of that success is attributable to that? And then how much of it, how much in the fact that he's got 1 million carries? I think he's almost 1,000 carries coming out of college. So those are the harder evaluations to me.
I don't support gambling on things that don't involve like college football, but the draft is borderline, right? I mean, it's college to pro. So let's do a little prop bet here. Let's have some fun. Will there be a tailback taken in the first round? Well, Brandon Gaudin has made his way on the College Sports Now. You hate to see it. Will there be a tailback taken in the first round of the NFL draft on next Thursday night?
Yes, I think there will be. And the reason I think that, one, history would suggest that it will be. There's only been, I think, one draft in the last 8 or 9 years where you haven't had a first-round running back. It always seems to sneak in the back of the first round. And while you may not have these teams at the top of the draft taking running backs because of all the things I just mentioned, it's more valuable to waste that or to spend that pick on an offensive lineman, a great edge rusher, a corner, these impact positions. Teams at the back of the first round that kind of have everything around, have those things set up, those teams can afford to say, hey, we just need one piece and it's a running back, so we're going to go ahead and draft that guy. So yeah, I think you have one. I think it's Swift sneaks into the back of the first round.
Is he healthy, by the way?
We're going to get – okay.
No, is Swift healthy? I mean, he did not play.
That's going to be the question.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's going to be the question, because he's had injury issues really his whole career at Georgia. I mean, he missed time, missed a little bit of time in 18, missed some time last year, obviously, had a shoulder, a groin, a toe, an ankle. Like he has had some injury issues, and those things don't go away in the league.
I get two questions here, Hartzell, because you asked two. So I just want to follow up on that. I don't know if people appreciate, Roddy, what running backs go through.
Yeah.
You mentioned it. We talk about it in sports. You know, there's a lot of hitting going on, but running backs, in my opinion, you're either pass blocking. You know, even when you run out to catch a pass, you're getting tackled. You're blocking for someone. You're running into the line of scrimmage. You're taking on linebackers. You're just running backs absolutely pummeled, which is why your life expectancy in the NFL is so short. And also, which is why I'm always so amazed by guys that last as long as they do. Like the guys that have those 10, 12, whatever year career, the Emmitt Smiths of the world. Like, how do they do that?
Yeah, Frank Gore is still playing in the league. How?
Exactly.
Nobody knows.
Yeah, that kind of stuff's crazy. So maybe I just wanted to point that out so that everybody understands. This is more of one of my famous, and I'm sorry, Stephen, philosophical questions. If Bo Jackson,
Steven's covering his face.
I know
it's fine. I mean, look, it's a 5-minute question. It's fine.
If Bo Jackson, if Eric Dickerson, Marcus Allen probably translate into any era because he caught the ball so well. Earl Campbell, even a guy like Adrian Peterson when he came out. You know, we just had Saquon, who a lot of people, would put in that category as talent. What would those guys be like in the modern NFL? I mean, if Bo Jackson walked onto a field tomorrow, ready to go, would his career be different because of the way that people use them? Or would people be saying, oh, running backs don't really matter that much? You know, we can go with anybody. I mean, to me, Marcus Allen, I like him too. But Bo Jackson, one of the greatest athletes in the history of mankind. You're getting where I'm coming from here. The game has changed in a way to where I had quarterbacks and running backs all over my wall when I was a kid. Yeah. I mean, I did. I had an ED poster. I had Marcus Allen. I had Earl Campbell. I had Tony Dorsett. Those dudes were ballers, right? And I know I'm older than all you guys, but like, what would those guys be like in the modern game?
I think it's a great question. Bigger guys. I think those guys still put an imprint on the game that's memorable, right? Just because they are so great. And I'm of the belief that great players of any era, if you normalize for athletic ability and training and all that stuff, but great players of any era are going to make an impact in any other era. Like, you can take guys from the 70s who maybe didn't have the nutrition or the weight training, and put them in this era, and if they have access to that, they're still going to be great because they're great players. So I think the bigger guys, when you talk about an Earl Campbell, when you talk about an Eric Dickerson, Bo Jackson, I think those guys evolve. Either they evolve and they become something a little bit different. Do they become a Leonard Fournette type where he's added some receiving ability to his game? Or maybe they just end up in a place like Derrick Henry did, where they decide to run the ball 150 times and, darn near make it to the Super Bowl because of it. So I think it's one or two things, but those guys still get picked at the top of the draft. Right. You look at your Zeke Elliott, your Christian McCaffrey, the Saquon Barkley. Those are impact players. And while Saquon Barkley, from a yards per carry standpoint, overall statistics standpoint, didn't have a great season, that team was awful. And he had some magnificent plays. I mean, he made some plays where you're like, wow, you put talent around that dude, and now you've got something really special.
Yeah, it's not his fault that Daniel Jones is under center. I mean, I know you love the ACC, Roddy, but come on. What are we doing there?
Hey,
really?
Give the guy a chance.
How do you feel about Danny Dimes?
I like him.
How do you feel about Danny Dimes?
I liked him a lot when he came out. Yeah. I don't think that was a bad pick at all. I think you're talking about, you had a quarterback. I just listen to this for a second. You had a quarterback in Eli who's won 2 Super Bowls. You think that all of a sudden those guys forget how to play? Yeah. The organizations let people down sometimes. The people around you in football matter a ton. So now you throw in a young kid who, by the way, and in my opinion, all the boxes. He really looks like he can play. You got to give him a chance. Listen, and this is going to be controversial what I'm about to say. Mobile quarterbacks have a better chance of looking decent on bad teams early because they can move around, they can run around, they can create. Problem is you put those guys in the playoffs against elite defenses, and they cannot do that anymore. obviously we'd like to have the best of both worlds, a guy that can move around and a guy that can read defenses and throw the ball on time. But trust me, you got to be patient when we're not in the world we're in today, and let this guy and build a team around him and see where he's at. But it's way too early to throw that on him right now.
Yeah, I agree, man.
I disagree.
I think Daniel Jones is well, obviously because you go for the fruit.
I'm not trying to sell vineyard vines. I'm trying to win games. Okay, Daniel Jones, please. I mean, come on.
Okay, so
Would be
listen.
good at selling vineyard vines. Though. I mean, it's good looking.
Let's have fun, Hartzell. If Steve Young, just one example of a guy that went to, obviously the the USFL, excuse me, and then Tampa, and then ends up sitting behind Joe, and then ends up being a Hall of Famer and one of the best quarterbacks of all time. If he never ended up in San Francisco, would Steve Young be Steve Young?
Love Steve Young. Yeah, I got no problem.
But you get my point, though?
No, I don't.
I could go even older, way before your time. Jim Plunkett was a stud at Stanford.
No one knows.
Yeah, and guys, I'm 49,
Stud.
all right? Jim Plunkett was a stud. He was a Heisman guy, right?
Didn't he win a Heisman? Yeah,
he won the Heisman. He won it over Joe Theismann, who changed his name to win the Heisman to whatever. Anyway, stop it, Hartzell. Don't look exasperated.
Is that true?
He got beat up with like a
Theismann.
bunch of teams before he ended up with the Raiders when he was old. Dude figured out a way that, hey, I can still ball, and ended up with 2 rings. It's not easy to do. The team around you does matter.
Can we fast forward back to can we get back in the 21st century, please?
I have a question about the
history
2020
is my
NFL
thing, man.
draft.
Come on.
Yes. Cerber is wearing head-to-toe Clemson gear. We have a member of the ACC network on our podcast tonight. So Cerber has a question. You go ahead, buddy. Get in there.
Yeah, man. So I want to ask about a running back from the ACC, not Cam Akers, who I think is really good, but another guy, A.J. Dillon from Boston College. I think he's got great size, and his 40 time, I think, surprised a few people at the combine. He ran a 4.5. He's like 250, right? Roddy,
huge guy.
What do you like? He's a guy that's probably going to go on Saturday, like maybe Friday if there's a run on backs, which most likely there won't be. What's your like NFL projection for A.J. Dillon?
I honestly don't really have a great feel for it, to be honest with you. I was talking to a scout before Boston College game this year, and I asked him what he thought about Dillon, and he was really intrigued because he said, look, there's not 250-pound backs that much in the NFL anymore. I mean, I don't know what Derrick Henry weighs. I'm assuming he weighs 300 pounds because he's a superhuman. Right. But other than that, like I can't think of another one, of another guy that's tipping 250 that is consistently productive. So, look, I think he's an early Saturday guy. I think he's an early day 3, 4th, 5th round. And if he could get to a place that is used to using big backs, so you think of somewhere like Seattle that had Marshawn Lynch, you think of somewhere like Jacksonville that had Leonard Fournette, you think of Tennessee as a backup to Derrick Henry. If you could get one of those places that knows how to use a back that's going to be limited on third downs, especially early in his career, wasn't asked to pass block a ton just because of the nature of that Boston College offense. It wasn't heavily involved in the pass game, although he did catch more passes his senior season, especially before Anthony Brown got hurt. But look, he can run. He's got a little bit of wiggle in the open field. He played behind a really good offensive line. He's got a ton of carries on him. So I think all in all, he's one of those guys on day 3 that's worth taking a flyer on. Just as long as you're probably going to get one contract out of him, and then you're not looking for him to be your back until he's 34.
Hey, Roddy, when you were talking to that BC scout, was that before the Boston College Florida State game by chance, the famed BC FSU game?
It was not before. It was not a BC scout. It was a scout from an NFL team, but it was before the BC FSU game this year.
Okay,
yes.
okay. For those out there in degenerate land know what I'm talking about. 28 points in the final 2:33 of that game. Just an amazing.
Yeah.
Just a little footnote to what was a phenomenal 2019 college football season. Florida State, Boston College, 28 points in the final 2:33. For those that are interested,
thanks for paying attention.
Oh, I remember.
Yeah,
it's in the Hartzell Hall of Fame of games. for reasons
That was crazy. Like the Florida State couldn't move the ball at all, and then they had a deep pass to Tamorion Terry right before half. I think that one was, and then you have the DJ Matthews at the end, and then the Jordan Travis appearance, and he has a zone read where he goes and scores. It was crazy.
A meaningless touchdown with 14 seconds to go. It's in the Hartzell Hall of Fame. So I want to pivot and talk wide receivers, Wayne, unless you want to mention anybody else who played with a leather helmet and a single bar back in the day.
I do. I want to. So I'm going to, we can talk about CeeDee Lamb and company in a second. This is a probably a long-winded question, and Stephen, I know you already had to extend our time doing this because I'm on board and we always go long. I'm just curious, a couple questions. One, and one of the hardest things that we do, Roddy, is when we're evaluating athletes, we know the players on the teams that we cover a little bit, but it's really hard to get to that it factor and that's like how driven they are. I mean, we see what they look like, they may work out, they look the part, but their attitude, the way they are around other people. And one of the players I've been lucky enough to be around at UCLA is a guy named Joshua Kelly. And I know that I'm sure you've heard of Joshua Kelly. He ended up having a great Senior Bowl. He went to the Combine and did very, very well. He's a guy that walked on to UCLA basically from UC Davis and absolutely is the kid is legit. He's big, he's strong, he runs downhill, he's got great vision. He does not let the first guy tackle him very often. I'm just curious. I think he's moved himself up playing for a bad team, and I hate saying that because I love my Bruins. I'm just curious if you know anything about Joshua Kelly and what you've heard.
I like Josh Kelly a lot because I fall in love with guys like him, a guy that was at UC Davis, took a bet on himself, decided to go to UCLA, walk on, and then just works his ass off. Can I say that? I already said it.
It's allowed.
Just works his ass off to make himself a player. Now, because of the fact that he had to walk on, he went to UC Davis. Athleticism is going to be a question, although I don't think for that guy, for him, the way he plays, I don't think it's that big an issue. He goes to the Combine, runs a 4.49. He's over 210 pounds, 5'10". Like, I think the guy is a really, really solid running back. It's probably going to land somewhere in the second, third. It's so much of it depends on when the run happens.
Right.
But if I'm a team sitting in the third round and I have a running back that I'm not convinced is the guy, Josh Kelly is a really, really good option because he does everything. He does everything well because he's had to in order to earn his way.
It's interesting, and I'll compare him to someone that has reminds me personality wise. I mean, there's not a lot of people like Joshua Kelly because he's always smiling, he's always positive, he's always working hard. Years ago, I fell in love with a special teams guy named Matthew Slater. Yeah. And I just loved it. I mean, we would interview him after games all the time because he'd touch the ball once and go 80. And we're like, I just loved his attitude, and he still he does nothing but make Pro Bowls, and they keep re-signing him. I mean, it's like he could do it forever. And so that attitude is something that doesn't get talked about probably enough. We're more concerned with the measurables and talent and all that stuff. And man, it does matter, and it might help Joshua Kelly hang around the league for a while.
And when you're a running back, we talked about the devaluing the position and all that. One of the things that we have not talked about with any of these guys is the ability to play special teams.
Right.
Joshua Kelly's going to be able to go and play special teams, and he will probably be able to play kickoff return, punt return. And when you can play the core four, you're a guy that's going to stick around. And then if you can be a situational back early in your career, that's not to say that he can't be an every down guy. Right. But I love this story. A lot of these guys that we're going to talk about first, second, third round, 4- and 5-star guys have had everything handed to them. Not that that's a bad thing, but motivation hasn't had to be. It hasn't always had to be there because the athleticism is so outrageous, and they're just so much better from an athletic standpoint. Now the guys that put it together and work hard obviously vault higher, but Joshua Kelly is a guy who has taken the road that lets you know it means something to him, and that's worth something.
Wayne, I do believe, I'll just check my notes here. Yes, we have in fact reached our quota on UCLA football talk for the show.
All right.
So
It's just, it is what it is. I just had to throw it out there.
I was gonna go with what's the tight end that's coming out. I can never pronounce his name.
Devin Asiasi.
Asiasi.
Started out at Michigan.
Yeah, he's a
Big,
good player, man.
moves well, catches the ball. He's very good.
Yeah, he's a good player. He's an inline Y guy. He'll block a little bit, get out in the route. I like him out of UCLA.
yeah, win more games. Speaking of winning games, let's talk wide receivers. Let's talk wide receivers, Roddy. This is and again, you've been doing the NFL draft stuff on SiriusXM all week. You are far more well spoken on this than I am. But when I look at the wide receiver crop, this is a super deep class, right? And these are guys that the average college football fan knows because it's big time names. You got the Alabama guys, the Oklahoma guys, the Clemson wide receivers. This is a stacked crop at the wideout position.
It is absolutely loaded. And look, the NFL quite honestly thinks it's loaded too. You don't let a guy like Stephon Diggs let Andre Hopkins go for peanuts and a bag of potato chips. You don't let those things happen if you don't feel good about not only the fact that you can get somebody else, but the fact that, hey, I can draft a guy maybe in the lower first, second round and get a really good player. It is absolutely loaded, and it's kind of a take your pick. What do you want? If you want a blazer, you've got Henry Ruggs. If you want a technician, you've got Jerry Jeudy. If you want a guy that's great after the catch, you got CeeDee Lamb. If you want a project, you got Chase Claypool. You just have so many of these guys that have different skill sets. If you want a guy that can operate in the slot, you got one of the guys that I like the most, Justin Jefferson out of LSU. His ability to operate in the slot, can probably slide outside too. I just think this wide receiver class is one of those that we're going to look back on and be like, man, that was a special group. And look, wide receivers don't typically make huge impacts early, so we may have to wait a couple years to see ultimately what this is going to be. But I'm really excited about this crew.
Man, put some respect on T. Higgins' name. You didn't even say it. You didn't even say it, dog.
You're right.
Let me add to what you just said. If you need somebody who's going to be the best wide receiver in the NFL within the next 3 years, take T. Higgins.
There it is. T. Higgins is interesting. T. Higgins is one of those guys, and this shows you the depth of the wide receiver class. T. Higgins is a guy that I've seen at the 4th best wide receiver by the draft experts. I've seen him as high as 4. I've seen him as low as 10. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that's disrespect putting him at 10. It just shows, look, this is a loaded class. And if you're not convinced about T. Higgins' route running ability, which I can see the questions there, if you're not convinced about his body type right now, because he is a little thin, I can see it there. Then yeah, he can slide down to 10. But if that guy slides, if he slides into the second round, which it's looking about 50-50 whether or not he will, you can pick him up in the second round. You're getting a receiver with great ball skills when the ball's in the air, great hands, his ability to snag the ball, and incredible body control. You can work on all the rest. You can grow him up a little bit, get him a little bigger. But he's got I like T. Higgins a lot. I'm an ACC guy, so of course I like T. Higgins.
There it is. Very on brand. Yes.
Yeah, well, there you go.
So like everything else in the draft, sometimes slipping has some positive results to it. In other words, you slip to a team that has a great quarterback and an offensive line and a running game, so that opens everything up for a receiver, maybe another receiver on the team. So much of this, where you end up, and we'll talk about it when we talk about quarterbacks. I just listened to, before we came on, I was listening to Deion Sanders kind of bash the Bengals a little bit, and talking about Joe Burrow, that people are going to have to be patient because he's going to an organization that's not the greatest. Where you end up matters so much. It's just some like, for example, you could go to a team that for whatever reason can never figure out the passing game. It is, you're just at a program where you can pick one. So to me, where these guys go, whether it's 1 or 10 or 15, I would hope you want the money, but you also want to go to a place where you're going to be able to show your talent.
I completely agree. The receiver position is almost the one that's most dependent on where you go. So if you go someplace that can't protect, there's no way you're getting the ball. If you go someplace with a quarterback with a noodle arm, there's no way you're getting the ball.
Atlanta.
So, come on, bro. I shouldn't even said noodle arm.
You walked
because I knew you were
into
going to come
it,
after
man.
my boy Matty Ice.
Trash.
I knew you were.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Hey,
there it is.
the Falcons
Unbelievable.
drafted 16. Who do you want, Roddy? I know you're tight with Dimitrov. Who do you want?
I want a pass rusher. I don't know if the pass rusher that is going to make a difference is going to be there then, or if you're kind of reaching. I've seen Kevon Chason out of LSU. I think athletically he's great. You're shaking your head. What?
I mean, the guy played 4 games this season. Like, he was a non-factor in the first 8 weeks. Remember? It was like, hey, when is LSU going to start getting to the quarterback? When are they going to show up? And they did, but it took until November.
That LSU defense was kind of banged up all over, especially on the defensive line. They were banged up on back end too. So when you're banged up on the defensive line and on the back end, you've only got one true pass rusher. And they also had Michael Divinity walk out on him. Basically, he said he had to go. So they had some issues on that defense that they had to figure out. And by the way, they did enough to win a national championship. So
Thank you, Roddy.
Them all you want.
This is Steven Hartzell. He picks teams. He'll find the team that wins it all, and he'll start throwing out flaws in them. You're crazy. You're absolutely crazy.
It's ridiculous. That's all.
Piece away,
Sounds a
man.
good player. I say all that to say that he's a good player, and if we got him, then I would accept him, and then we'd ruin him, and he'd go somewhere else and be good.
There you go.
This is
Hashtag
what we do
brotherhood.
with pass rushers. Like what happened to Vic Beasley and Tack McKinley. Like we have been through this with pass rushers. Maybe we'll get it right every once in a while. Honestly, now you got me on my Falcons thing.
Come on.
Honestly, that's why I wanted us to not be good the whole year instead of being awful for the first 8 games and then pretty good the last 8 games, giving us the pick at 16.
Yeah.
If we'd have just been awful,
Right.
we could have picked at 2 and drafted Chase Young, and then we'd have our pass rusher.
Look, there's nothing worse in the NFL than going 7-9, right? Like, that's the worst thing because it just, it is what it is. Hey, you mentioned ACC.
Not your fault, man.
Thank you. Put the piece away. Roddy, you mentioned ACC. Obviously, you do a great job with the ACC network and the worldwide leader when football does, not if, but when it comes back online. Who else out of the ACC you got your eye on? Like it doesn't even have to be a round 1 guy, but someone that you've watched over the last couple of years that you're high on, who's finally going to get a chance to go pro next week.
Well, I want to – there's a couple that fall into that category. The first one is a round 1 guy now. He's kind of been borderline for most of the process, but most recently I've seen him on multiple round 1 mock drafts, and that's AJ Terrell, the corner out of Clemson, your boy Serbs. Pick 6 in the national championship game 2 years ago, got completely abused in the national championship game this past year.
Man.
So national championship games for him, it's hit or miss.
50-50.
But,
Yeah.
but it's 50-50.
Not cool, dude.
But he is – what'd you say, sir?
I said not cool, man. Why'd you put me down like that?
Look, Jamar Chase is still scoring touchdowns on the dude.
That
Not
was
that he didn't score touchdowns on a lot of people, but
You're
wasn't
just
great.
mean. You're just mean.
But he's a big-bodied corner. He's got great skills. Gets a little handsy sometimes. But I think he's a guy that has obviously been shooting up draft boards, at least according to the draft experts. So I think AJ Terrell is a guy that I'm excited to see how he translates to the next level because of his size and length, his ability to block in the run game, to tackle in the run game as well. I think he's a physical guy that doesn't shy away. So, and I like his attitude. I like the way he plays. And then the other one is mainly because I feel really bad for him. What he's been through the last 3 years is Cam Akers. It's running back from FSU. Like this dude has the record for most rush yards by a freshman in Florida State history. Think of all the running backs that have played at Florida State, even the ones that have done it recently, like Dalvin Cook, for example. Great running back, Florida State. Had the record, doesn't have it anymore because Cam Akers did it on a 7-6 football team that went to the Independence Bowl in Shreveport. Like that team was not very good, and he still set that record. And he had to play for 3 different offensive coordinators in 3 years, play behind an offensive line that is only slightly better than the 4 of us and one of my toddler daughters. Like just slightly better than that. I mean, and he still put up good numbers. So I'm excited to see what he does. He's an incredible athlete that has not been able to develop as a runner because he had no holes to run behind. He was just being an athlete. Was still a really good player. I think he's going to make a really good pro. He's a guy that you can plug in on third downs early in his career. As long as he gets better pass blocking as a receiver, he's pretty good. So I'm excited to see those 2 guys, especially when they go to the NFL.
Some of the players I've seen up close and personal, receivers, going back to receivers. CeeDee Lamb, he made the one-hand catch you've probably seen over and over again against UCLA.
I haven't. I forgot about that.
Yeah, that was pretty good. Pretty good catch. Pretty amazing athlete. Love watching him play. That's one. So CeeDee Lamb, Laviska Shenault for Colorado, who has all kinds of talent, but has been so beat up and just hurt. Part of that's because they tried to use him. I mean, shoot, he was taking direct snaps and running the ball at times for Colorado. And then the other one that people aren't talking about is Hodgins from Oregon State, because they're not a very good team. But that dude can flat out ball if he gets an opportunity.
Yeah, I don't know much about Isaiah Hodgins. I really don't.
He's really, really good in person. I'll just say that. I was like, wow, this guy is absolutely a stud. But, nobody ever saw him play.
Yeah, because nobody watches Oregon State football.
Yes.
The one that I think is interesting is Laviska Shenault that you said, Wayne, because the injuries with the style that he plays and the way they played him, I guess, too, that is concerning, because you do want to use him like that, but if he can't stay healthy, then he's no use to you. The one that I did not get a chance to see in person that sort of after the season have looked more into and really like is Brandon Ayuk from Arizona State. Kind of a jack of all trades guy, use him all over the field, a guy that ran really well as well. Did you get a chance to see him in person? Because I like him a lot.
He's really good. Yeah, he looks the part. He's extremely athletic. Yeah, he's a stud. I mean, there's guys. The thing about receivers is it just, like you said, it just feels like the way the game has evolved. The receiver position, there's so much talent. There's probably players we're not even talking about that 5-10 years down the road are going to end up being great NFL players. Like Ayuk a lot. He's really good.
Yeah. I think it's just this class is so interesting because you have guys like Shenault, Ayuk, and that are guys that are incredible after the catch. You have Henry Ruggs. As soon as he steps on the field, doesn't matter if he can run any route in the route tree other than straight. As soon as he steps on the field, you got to account for him because 4.27 doesn't grow on trees. So you have a guy like that. I tell you, the guy that I like that's probably going to be a second, third round pick is Chase Claypool from Notre Dame, because in terms of body, the dude has it. I mean, he looks like a Greek god when he steps onto the field. And from a play standpoint, the production was there with, let's be honest, I think it'd be nice to say inconsistent quarterback play that he got at Notre Dame. Is that fair? That's fair?
Yeah.
But the dude was 238, and he ran, what did he run? I think he ran like a 4.4, low 4.4s. Like, you can't teach that. So development on the route tree is obviously going to need to be there. But in terms of working, in terms of intelligence, Chase Claypool's got it, man. So he's a guy that I think could be one of those, second, third round guys that we look up, and he's like DK Metcalf, who tore it up in Seattle.
That's good. Wayne, Serbs, do you guys have any more personnel questions about the draft? Because I would like to ask Roddy a couple of college football questions before we cut loose here. But Wayne, again, I didn't know if you had like a Fran Tarkenton question lined up or something. No, you're good.
He was an undersized quarterback that had a heck of a career.
Okay, we don't really talk much Fran Tarkenton around here because, as I understand, he went to the University of Georgia. So not real high on the Fran Tarkenton talk.
Yeah, I understand.
Never won a ring. It's okay. We don't. Isn't that how we judge people?
Roddy, I asked.
That's most of the people that played at the University of Georgia.
Wow, 1980 was a long time ago. Yeah.
Can we die? Yeah.
Roddy, I asked Wayne this question in the first episode we did earlier this week, and an hour later we kind of wrapped up the show. But you work for the ACC network, all right? You are part of the worldwide leader. You are part of the college football machine, right? Like we all are, but you especially being on television. I'm just curious, put the draft stuff aside, coronavirus is affecting a lot more than just college sports, but as we gear up for, spring football, which we know isn't happening, but once we get into these summer months and we get ready for what is scheduled to be a Labor Day kickoff, what are you hearing? What are your, perceptions of the likelihood of college football in 2020? And, kind of the second part to that, how long do you have to wait before you make a decision on whether or not you can actually do a season? Because, college football, the guys got to get conditioned, they got to practice. you can't just roll it out there and expect this to happen. I mean, college football is kind of a unique sport in that it takes a little while to bake. So I know that's a lot. I just went Wayne on you there with like a 3-part question. But what are you hearing, and what do you anticipate as we get ready for the fall?
I'm not hearing much, and I've talked to people, with networks. I've talked to agents. I've talked to, my peers who are talking heads. Nobody really knows. And look, so much of this is going to be determined. It's going to be outside of the total control of college sports. So much of this is going to be determined by state colleges, which ultimately is determined by the states and the legislature. Like, I live in Georgia. The governor of Georgia, Brian Kemp, was the one who shut down college in Georgia. Like, no state college is coming back. And if that happens in the state of Georgia and the University of Georgia isn't playing football, is the SEC going to play football? I don't know. I don't see how that can happen. I don't see how you can do it with parts of a conference. So much of it's going to be outside of the control of college sports. So I don't know. I don't know. I think a lot of it's going to be determined by the people that you see and hear on TV all the time in giving updates, whether it's governors or up to national government, up to the president. So I think a lot of it's going to be up to what happens with the states. The second part of that, how long does it take to get ready to go? That is the hardest thing about this for college coaches, is keeping these guys in football shape. You are talking about a significant portion of the college football landscape that either had very abbreviated spring practice or no spring practice at all. So guys are kind of on more of a pro timetable where they're not getting to hit in the spring. They now have to go home and take care of their bodies by themselves. Oh, and by the way, you can't go to a gym because all the gyms are closed. So now you got to do it at home with water jugs and book bags. And maybe you're wealthy enough to get to have a weight set up in your
gym
house.
Yeah, behind you there.
The old ab wheel.
Yeah, exactly, in an ab wheel. But maybe you're fortunate enough to have that, or your parents are into it enough to have it. But I would say most of these guys probably not. They rely on high school gyms all over the place. So I would say when those guys get back, in order to get into football shape, you got to get in condition 4 to 6 weeks,
right,
in order to get these guys ready to go and play football at a level where they can take care of themselves and ultimately stay healthy.
No, I agree. I think it's funny because I know that they're probably, like, my 14-year-old is a member of a local gym for athletes, and they've been sending everything out online, like new workouts and it's a lot of stuff where you can just use your body weight. But we know to play at the highest level, I mean, that's good for a 14-year-old. But when you're trying, Steven and I talked about it the last time we were on. I mean, we may see athletes that look a little different than they did because they may not be as big as they would be if they were eating, because we forget about that. Like, all the food is prepared for athletes in a way, whether they're losing weight, gaining weight, trying to build muscle, trying to be lean. I mean, all that stuff's crucial. They're not getting that when mom or grandma or whoever's cooking is feeding these kids a bunch of fried foods or whatever they're not used to eating.
I think that is spot on. I think there's 2 things there that you really hit on that I think is spot on. One, the fact that most of the guys are going to have to concentrate on body weight or lower weight, high rep stuff means the mentality for strength coaches has changed. You're trying to maintain. You're just trying to not lose what you've already built. I'm not sure how much strength you're going to build in a house using whatever you've got around the house. And 2, for linemen, so many linemen play above their natural body weight because of the fact that they have access to basically unlimited amounts of food. So they can load themselves up with 6,000 calories a day. If you come from a place where you're not able to, and look, this has affected people in a lot of ways.
Right.
So imagine a kid that goes home whose mom works in a restaurant, who now doesn't have a job. Dad works someplace where, maybe he's okay, but if you have 2 incomes or 1 income that's been sacrificed, are you able to buy 6,000 calories worth of food a day to feed a giant?
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know. So yeah, I think you're right. I think you could see linemen come back that are supposed to be at 295. You could see them at 275.
Yep.
And I think that could happen on a large scale because it just takes so much to keep that body weight. And then those big guys, so much of it comes down to motivation. I mean, Wayne, and Hartzell and Serber, you guys know too. In every industry, so much of it comes down to motivation. If someone's not watching you, are you doing it?
Right.
How many guys on a football team, 120 guys, how many guys on your team, Wayne, would you say, I know they are busting their ass. I already said it once, so I can say it again. They're busting their ass every day to maintain what they've got, even though nobody's watching.
You know this. I remember being in college, and this was even before I was, a full-time guy. When I'm young and I'm living with a couple of older guys that were starters, and they're like, dude, come on, we're gonna go run stadiums. We're gonna go do this. In summertime. Like, come on, man, let's just hang out on the rooftop and have a Corona. I don't want to do that. So by the way, poor choice of beer that popped into my brain. I didn't do that on purpose.
PBR.
Okay, back then it would have been, for me, it would have been a Keystone Light. Okay, I don't know if you guys even remember that particular beverage.
Yeah.
Keystone Light still, it ages well.
Yeah, right. So, but you're right. The motivation from, there are guys that go into the gym. We used to have cards that we'd fill out. And I know everything's different now. I'm going back to the early 90s. And some guys would go in and fill out their cards and put them back in the slot, and other guys would actually go in there and work out. Yeah. There's a lot of that. I mean, you watch kids just condition. How many kids, when you tell them to run around the cone or to touch the line, end up 2 inches short every freaking time?
And that's when you're watching. That's when they're being watched.
Exactly. Now, what are they going to do? And again, we've played with players even at the college level. You know this, Roddy, and I know this. I have played with guys that had so much talent that if they ever figured out how to work hard, they would have been so much better than they were. And there's guys like that all over America. So you're right. That self-accountability is a huge factor right now, especially.
That's the thing that would keep me up at night if I was a coach. Are the guys? I think the starters, the guys that feel like they have something at stake. You got to trust those guys, the older guys. You got to trust those guys to be able to be accountable for you. You got to trust those guys to be putting their work in. But are the guys that are the second string defensive end, who's going to be a rotational player, but not a starter, the guy that's already a little disgruntled, whose auntie's telling him that he should be playing anyway, are those guys going to be busting their tails week in and week out? And look, I think you're going to see, or you have the potential to see, guys that may not have been starters, had this not happen, become starters because they are doing that. They are getting better, or at least not getting worse during this time. So it's going to be fascinating because I don't know how, if you're Trevor Lawrence, you stay sharp enough to do what you need to do when you get back. I don't know how, if you're Justin Fields, and unless you're going and getting 5 receivers, 10 receivers to throw to on a daily basis, how you can feel good about stepping on campus to being right back where you were. I just don't know. Maybe those guys are getting creative, and I hope they are. I really do.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I want to end it on a light note, and you mentioned Trevor Lawrence, and that's a perfect segue to talk about hair. Wayne and I had this discussion earlier in the week. I believe Mrs. Cook helped give Wayne a haircut, and it looks.
I have a little
really
bit of a bald. I have a little bit of a bald spot right here, though.
But by and large,
wasn't quite right.
It looks pretty good.
Looks really good on Zoom.
It does look good. Serber doesn't get haircuts, so he's not part of this discussion.
Not necessary. Nope.
I got a buzz, which it's kind of hard to screw that up. But Roddy, your hairline looks pretty tight for a guy who's 1 month into quarantine. I don't know if you saw the pictures of DJ Khaled on Twitter.
I did.
He looks like a guy who just stepped out of solitary confinement. I mean, he looks rough. You look relatively put together. So how is that happening? Because I know there's statewide stay-at-home orders in Georgia. So is the wife helping you out there? Are you doing it yourself? What's going on behind the scenes?
So my wife has been lobbying me to cut my hair basically since the quarantine started, even before quarantine, because she gets annoyed with the fact that I go to the barber shop and, my barber, shout out to Reggie, my barber, sometimes he's on time, sometimes he's not, usually not. And like when I sit in the chair, he wants to show me pictures and like we have a good conversation about LeBron and like he's
There you
cutting
go.
me. And then 3 hours later, I get to leave the barbershop. My wife's like, what were you doing? I'm like, getting a haircut. And she's like, it doesn't take that long. I'm like, well, it's a whole thing. And, she doesn't understand that. She's been lobbying me to do this for a long time. So I had, if you caught me about a week and a half ago, had a lot of hair. And I just finally decided that it was time for it to go. The thing is, though, if my wife messed up my hair, and I told her this, I said, look, if you mess up my hair, I'm just gonna be mad at you. I'm gonna be mad at you, and I'm not really gonna be able to explain why, but it's like gonna fester just under the surface for a long time until my hair grows back and it looks decent. So you can't do it. Like if I mess up my hair, then I'm just an idiot. So I'm gonna do it. So I cut my own hair, and I did the basics. I went pretty low. I didn't really line myself all that well, but it's good enough for passers-by to be like, oh, he doesn't look like he's homeless.
Yeah.
I just kind of, trimmed up the line a little bit, and yeah, it'll do for
It
quarantine.
looks like you blended though. The top's a little bit.
Appreciate that.
Well, because and that's important because, and I'll tell you this, Roddy, my wife and I actually got in a little bit of a skirmish and she had to leave the room and I finished.
Uh-oh.
Well,
You
because
didn't
she was kind of babying it, and I'm like, you know what? And it was not her fault. I was like, what are you doing? And then I was like, because I told her before, and I'll just buzz it if it's screwed up. No big deal, no pressure. But she was uptight and nervous about it because she didn't want to screw it up. So I just said, I got it. We'll just figure it out.
Yeah, and it's difficult. Like I did the back, and the back doesn't look as good as the front.
Yeah,
but, I'm having to go left hand
Yeah.
with the back, and that's hard. That's hard. But ultimately, like it does look great. But I made it not look great. If she had made it look great, I'd been
I
like,
gotcha. I think it looks solid, man. Don't worry about it.
Appreciate that.
Yeah.
Appreciate that. I wear hats most of the time anyway, so I wasn't
Gotcha.
really stressing about it.
No, it looks good. I mean, you work in TV, so you can't let yourself.
I do want to know what's going on with this mustache though, Hartzell. Like
you mean
you've
that
got
right there?
you've got
That right
you've
there?
got some
You like
you've
that?
got some mustache game going right now.
Don't you think though, Roddy, that actually fits him more than not having it? I mean, that's like
Here's
perfect
the
for
thing.
you.
Here's the thing. It's quite liberating because
it?
I wake up in the morning forgetting that it's here, and I look in the mirror and I'm like, oh boy, you just gotta have fun with it, man. You gotta
Have
have
you seen the Family Guy episode where he grows a mustache and thinks he's like in the mustache club?
Peter
No.
Griffin's got a mustache.
No, that's a cartoon. I don't watch cartoons, Wayne. I'm a grown man.
It's quality entertainment, okay? Don't you knock Family Guy.
Last time I grew a mustache was my buddy's bachelor party. We went to Atlantic City, New Jersey, which is an appropriate
Well,
place
I
for
feel
a
like
mustache.
you have to
because
have a
that's
mustache
that's
in
a
Atlantic
filthy,
City, New Jersey.
filthy place. But we got on what is commonly referred to as a heater. Okay, so mustaches aren't the worst thing in the world, and the wife
Mustaches
likes it.
equal
So
heaters.
I'm gonna keep it. I'm gonna keep it around for a little while. We'll see. Plus, schools
Actually,
and
my-
playgrounds
my
are
favorite-
closed,
my-
so I'm
Oh,
okay.
fair.
I'm fine.
My favorite Hartzell is the 5 o'clock shadow Hartzell, not
Yeah.
necessarily
Still there,
full
too.
bearded Hartzell, but
Yeah.
like 5 o'clock shadow Hartzell. I
It
think
looks
that
good. I
you
look
got a little
like
George
if
Clooney
Freddie
going on.
Mercury
Anytime-
and Mary Bird had a
No.
child. That's what I look like.
Anytime you can cover up more of your face, I think it's good.
Shout out to
The only
Bohemian
problem is
Rhapsody. Yes.
Only problem is I have to squint just a little bit to see it. Like you're
Yeah,
lacking
it's-
some
yeah,
thickness
that's
at the
fine.
moment.
I told
It's
Hartzell
gotta-
this on
it's
the
gotta fill
phone.
in.
I told Hartzell this on the phone. Guys, you're not going to believe me, but I'm going to move the microphone to the side. I'm going to let you guys see. I shaved 2 weeks ago. This is what I'm
No, come on.
Yeah.
look,
He's
this
a
is
baby.
obviously not a if this is just a podcast, it's not a visual medium, but it looks like
You just
it looks
shaved.
like I just shaved. It
Yeah.
does. It
Yeah.
does. And like
You're a child.
in maybe a month, I'll have like 5 o'clock shadow.
Yeah.
Let's be
Wow.
honest.
I
You're
could
a
have a
child.
beard in 3 days. I have a problem with it. I mean, like I have to shave every day.
I mean, look, this is a separate podcast that we can do. I mean, because look, it is the quarantine. Like I did my laundry the other day. It was a lot of t-shirts and sweatpants, boys. I mean, there's not a lot of.
Welcome
I'm
to my
not
life.
leaving the house, so why bother, right? I mean, really, let's be honest. Roddy, I know you're a busy guy, so thank you for taking the time. And I know you got a couple of sets you still need to do with that ab wheel back there. So
You want to hop in? Hey, look, I'll give you my address. You want to come?
You will get shredded quick. For those that don't know, you go out to the side too. You don't just go straight up and down.
Yeah.
You go out to the side. Not like I've used it in about 12 years.
Are those workout bands? Are those cords behind you? You know, I have a few of those in my house too.
course you do.
Yeah, we got the Resistance band. Big fan of the Resistance band. Friday's band day. Friday we burn out on bands.
Yeah.
We got the barbell here. Obviously, I'm sitting next to the physio ball. I'm picking up the physio ball. We got the Bosu ball over there. This has been a development. Like, I'm a fairly new homeowner. We bought a house 3 years ago. So on Craigslist, we slowly accumulated things, and yeah, you know, it's
we
good.
just added the Peloton to our world.
So
yeah, we just added the Peloton.
Goodness
My wife has done like 15 days straight of it though. She does it every day.
You like people screaming at you when you're working out? That does it for you? You like people?
I'm more like Roddy. I have the bands and I have some weights that I use in the backyard and I run. You know, but as far as doing the Peloton, that's for my wife, and my son does it some too.
There's like a secret. It's not so secret because they post it every day, but there is a really strong contingent of like college football analysts that are all about Peloton.
It's a great workout. I mean, trust me, when my 14-year-old does it, like, he's exhausted afterwards.
How about you just run?
Today's episode brought to you by Peloton.
How about you just run? I mean, you know, that's as good.
I like to run
Hartzell,
myself.
Big runner, Hartzell.
Yeah.
Like,
Gotta move,
Hartzell
man.
runs like 10 miles, don't you?
No, but if I didn't run, I would. I mean, I bought a bag of Easter candy for the kids. It never made it to Easter. Like, I was popping them in like 7 at a time. Bad sweet tooth, real bad.
To get us through this quarantine, my wife and I just consistently been baking baked goods. We are currently out, but that's after a week of, let's say, we had banana bread. We had
Quick
what else
question
do
on the
we have?
banana bread.
I
Quick
love
question.
banana bread.
Do you go Greek yogurt or sour cream in the recipe?
I don't know. I actually don't know. My wife does the banana bread, so I have no idea what goes into it. I have no idea. I have done the chocolate chip cookies. So did the brownies. She did. What did she do? I can't remember what the other baked good. But chocolate bread pudding's next on the list. So that's.
So when we see Roddy on the ACC network in a couple months, he's going to be.
He's gonna.
We're going to have to go
you guys-
widescreen. We're going to have to zoom
guys
out.
you guys did
He's going to be a fatty. Okay.
You
He's
didn't
been eating
ask
his way through the
why all
quarantine.
of this workout equipment was behind me. It's because it is completely necessary. at this
Necessary,
point in time.
yes.
It is getting me through.
Camera adds 10 pounds.
Hey, look.
Quarantine adds 15.
It's just good to have some
Quarantine
adult
15.
interaction, right, Roddy? You got 2 young girls running around the house. It's just nice to have some adult interaction from time to time. Right?
Exactly.
Good.
Exactly. So, some of
At
that's
Roddy
behind me.
Jones 20 on Twitter. I know you're doing some stuff with SiriusXM, ACC, right? 371.
One.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I know you're everywhere,
371.
man.
And I've got some other projects that I'm working on that may or may be coming out soon. I don't know. It's quarantine. Who knows what's going to
Nice.
happen?
Wow, love that. Well, keep us posted, man. You're a friend of the program. We like to support our own. Roddy, good stuff, my man. We're going to wrap it up. That's an hour. We were supposed to go 30 minutes, but as usual, Wayne dragged it out with questions
That's
about
wonderful.
Evolution.
We
and
were supposed to go
other
30
things.
minutes?
Yeah.
It's impossible.
Yeah.
That's
No, we were
one
supposed to go
topic. You
30.
kidding me?
Seriously.
At CS Now Tweets on Twitter. We're back periodically, just talking draft and having a good time with the guys here. So on behalf of Roddy, Wayne, Serber, I'm Hartzell. We're out. So long. Good stuff, guys. That was fun.
Good job, boys.
It was very good.
We should do it more often.